I'm Michael Mack. I'm one of the owners of the Yiban restaurant. I was born in Vietnam in 1969. I was born in Hai Phong, a small city in Vietnam. We left Vietnam since at that time there were many people escaping from the Sino-Vietnamese War. My mum and myself went to Macau, whilst my dad continued his journey to Hong Kong. Later, my dad came to Macau to be with us, and the three of us flew to the UK together. So we arrived in the UK in 1981. I was about 10 years old then. Having arrived in the UK, we stayed in Scotland and later went to join my mum's younger sister, who was living in Newcastle. I was just about 12 years old then, and began school in the UK by attending a secondary school in Newcastle. I didn't know a word of English at that time. After managing to complete my O and A levels, I started to look for work. At that time, my dad was working at a Chinese restaurant in Newcastle, but he didn't want me to work in catering. Although some of my friends were doing casual jobs in takeaway shops, my dad insisted that I should get a 9-to-5 job in a Western setting, even if it provided less income. So in the beginning, I never wanted to get involved in the catering business. We moved again to London. My Newcastle friends also moved down here. These friends were originally from the same city in Vietnam. In London, I took a course in management, whilst my friends worked in restaurants. One of them had been working in a Chinese restaurant for a while during our time in Newcastle. Another one had worked in a Japanese restaurant too. The only experience I had was working as a supermarket manager, but after a few years, I found it wasn't a suitable job for me, so I left it and took a driving instructor's course. I heard somewhere that there were only 4 Chinese-speaking driving instructors in London at that time. Being both Vietnamese and Chinese, I thought I should be able to get work quite easily. So I passed the driving instructor's exams and became a driving instructor. I worked for BSM and was the youngest driving instructor in Stamford Hill. I had customers in various places in London. So even now, many years after leaving, I still meet people who come to me and say, "Hey, recognise me? You are my driving instructor." To date, I still keep in touch with many of my previous customers. I had this job for over 10 years. During that time, I was always in close contact with my friends, who later became Yiban restaurant part owners. Together with their experiences in catering and mine in management, we decided to open a restaurant together. Our plan was that the friend who previously owned a takeaway would take care of the kitchen, and the one who worked for the Japanese restaurant would look after the dining hall, whilst I would be dealing with external affairs since I was the best English speaker. In the beginning, we didn't think of a big restaurant like Yiban we have today. The three of us were thinking of opening a restaurant in Dockland. However, because of some issues with the lease, we were not able to take up the offer there. We had to abandon the plan in Dockland, but it didn't stop us from looking. I was living in Newham then, somewhere near Beckton. On my journeys out, I would always see this building standing there, but did not know what it was. In those days, it was basically deserted. Not many people around. Next to it was a Newham council building and some hotels on the opposite side. There was the Excel Centre, which was about to take shape, but there were no Chinese restaurants nearby. For Chinese food, you'd have to go to Chinatown. Although the New World restaurant did come to the scene, it was on the other side of the river. So we were thinking that if we could open a Chinese restaurant here, we could attract lots of customers for dim sum. We chose this place since there was plenty of parking available. We reckoned that in the long run, most people would drive to eat out. So we approached the building's owner through the internet. The building then was a rowing centre, and the floor that Yiban is on now was a cafe. The floor below was for people who came to row and do exercise in the gym, who also might come up to the cafe to eat breakfast. The building owner wanted to rent it out to some other business. That's where we came in. We started business in September 2003. Unfortunately, the first year was a failure. The reason being was because the buildings around us were empty. No one wanted to rent them, which meant that no one was around. Also, Excel did not become what we had expected. It took several years before things started to happen there. For the first 3 months, nobody knew where we were. There was no GPS in those days. It was difficult to give directions over the phone. The streets here had no road signs. In fact, when I first came here, there were no roads for me to drive on. No signs were allowed in the building too for some reason. Later, when GPS became available, finding us became easier. Also, more and more people promoted us through word of mouth. A lot of customers would ask us why we chose this location to set up the restaurant. It was considered a very unusual location by most people. Even if you asked me today, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't consider opening a restaurant here either. But at that time, all we had in our mind was to go ahead with our plan. We didn't think of anything else. It was as simple as that. We were ambitious. We were not afraid of losing. All we had in our mind was success. We started advertising everywhere, on TV, radio, newspapers, and through word of mouth. The Evening Standard and some other newspaper came to see us. They interviewed us and wrote a good review about the restaurant. We have close relationships with Chinese and Vietnamese community centres, and I myself once worked in a youth club there too. So we offered annual free dim sum meals to older people in the community centres, who in return helped us spread the word for us. 8 months down the road, we began to receive bookings for banquets. Our dim sum service was also busy. A few years later, the XL began to stage shows, which helped to bring in customers on weekdays for us. In addition, the hotels around were also getting busy. More customers arrived from the hotels, signposted by hotel staff, when we offered meal discounts. Business flourished, so good that we were able to open another restaurant in Chelsea 1 year later, although that one was later sold due to various operational problems. With a lot of Chinese companies involved in the development along the dockside, we hope in the future a new Chinatown is going to happen there, although this had not been in our mind when we started the business. If it's ever going to happen, it would be a bonus for us. We will have a mini Chinatown next door. The more people, the better. The Chinatown will help us, and in turn, people who come to visit will visit other shops and places in the area. Let's hope for a better future.